Cheers ended in 1993 in front of 80 million viewers. The cast walked off that soundstage as some of the most famous people in America. But what happened next was nothing like what anyone expected. One of them appeared in blackface months after the finale. Another disappeared so completely that when a reunion was planned in 2024, she simply never showed up. One lost his sister to a brutal murder and nearly destroyed himself with addiction. Another died on the exact anniversary of the show's last episode. And the actor who almost didn't get cast at all, he invented his own character in the audition room. The real stories start where the sitcom stopped. When Cheers first premiered on September 30th, 1982, it did not look like the start of a classic. In fact, it looked like a failure. In its first week, the show landed around 74th out of 77 programs in the Nielsen ratings, which put it near the very bottom of television. Critics were not especially excited either, and even NBC's own research suggested that many viewers did not quite connect with the Boston bar setting or the show's slower, more character-driven humor. By the usual standards of the time, that should have been the end of it. Most networks would have pulled the show quickly and moved on. But NBC did something unusual. Instead of giving up, the network stayed patient. Executives, especially Brandon Tartikoff, noticed that the show was doing better with younger adult viewers, and that mattered. So even while the ratings looked ugly, they held on. That decision changed everything. By the second season, the numbers started to improve. By season 3, Cheers had climbed into the top 10. A few years later, it became the #1 show in America during the 1989 to 1990 season. What began as a near cancellation slowly turned into one of the biggest sitcoms in television history. That rise is even more surprising when you look at the cast the show started with. At launch, NBC could not really sell Cheers on star power because there was almost none. Ted Danson had done a few television roles and some small film work, but he was far from a household name. Shelley Long was not yet a major star. Kirstie Alley would only join later, and she too came in without the kind of fame that could carry a network campaign on its own. So NBC had to sell the show on the writing and the idea itself, a neighborhood bar where everybody knows your name. In time, that gamble paid off in a huge way. The same actors who began as unfamiliar faces would go on to win Emmys and Golden Globes and become some of the most recognized sitcom stars of their era. Ted Danson's own journey with the show started with a strange little choice that ended up fitting perfectly. When he auditioned for Sam Malone in the spring of 1982, he wore a cheap fake toupee because he believed a balding former baseball player turned ladies' man would be funnier that way. The producers loved the bit so much that they worked it right into the pilot. In the episode that aired on September 30th, 1982, Sam panics and yanks the toupee off. It was silly, sharp, and memorable, which also says a lot about what Cheers was becoming. The show would go on to run for 11 seasons, ending on May 20th, 1993, after 275 episodes. Over that stretch, Ted Danson became one of the defining faces of television comedy. He earned 9 straight Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series, won his first Emmy on September 16, 1990, and then won again on September 19, 1993, the same year the show ended. He also picked up Golden Globe wins in January 1989 and 1990, which confirmed that the actor NBC once could not sell as a star had fully become one. Yet just as Cheers ended, Danson's public image took a serious hit. On October 13, 1993, only a few months after the final episode, he appeared at Whoopi Goldberg's Friars Club roast at the New York Hilton. The room was packed with celebrities, around 3,000 people in all. But the performance quickly went from shocking to deeply uncomfortable. Danson appeared in blackface makeup and used the N-word repeatedly while delivering crude jokes about Goldberg, along with racial stereotypes and humiliating material that left the room stunned. Roger Ebert, who was there, later wrote that the laughter faded fast and the mood turned painfully tense. Some guests reportedly looked so uneasy that they wanted out. Danson would later describe the whole thing as a graceless moment, and that description stuck because there was little else to call it. That scandal landed in the middle of another personal collapse. His relationship with Whoopi Goldberg had grown out of an affair that began in the late 1980s and intensified around the making of Made in America in 1992. That affair shattered his marriage to Casey Coates, whom he had married in October 1977. They had 2 daughters, Kate, born in 1979, and Alexis, born in 1985 after a difficult birth that left Coates temporarily paralyzed from a stroke. The divorce that followed in 1993 was massive, with reports placing the settlement at around $30 million. Danson and Goldberg later married on September 14, 1994, but that relationship did not last either, ending with a divorce on October 30, 1995. For Danson, the years right after Cheers felt like free fall. He once compared it to jumping off a cliff. But oddly enough, the damage to his polished Sam Malone image also freed him. The scandal hurt him, but it also broke the idea that he could only play one kind of man. That mattered, because his career did not end with Cheers. It changed shape. From October 6, 1998 to January 28, 2004, he starred in Becker as the cranky and cynical Dr. John Becker, a role that gave him a very different comic voice and added another 177 episodes to his television career. Then, years later, he won over an entirely new generation with The Good Place, which ran from September 19, 2016 to January 30, 2020. As the strange and charming Michael, he showed that he could still surprise people, and in 2019 he earned another Emmy nomination. Along the way, he also played D.B. Russell on CSI from 2011 to 2015 and became a recurring delight on Curb Your Enthusiasm from 2000 through 2024. By 2025, when he received the Carol Burnett Award at the Golden Globes, his career had clearly become something larger than Cheers. And by 2026, at 78, he was still working, now appearing in Netflix's A Man on the Inside. If Ted Danson grew into the steady center of Cheers, Shelley Long arrived as its bright early spark. In the first half of the 1980s, she was not just important to the show. She was one of the most awarded actresses on television. In 1983, at age 33, she won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a comedy series for playing Diane Chambers. She kept up an impressive streak of 4 straight Emmy nominations from 1982 through 1985, and she also won Golden Globes in 1983 and 1985. That combination made her one of the most decorated TV actresses of the early 1980s. By 1986, reports said she was earning about $150,000 per episode, a huge salary for a sitcom lead at the time, and roughly double what many rival network stars were making. For a while, she was not just one of the stars of Cheers. She was arguably the star. That is why her exit became such a major event. Shelley Long's final Cheers episode, I Do, Adieu, aired on May 7, 1987, and the producers took extreme steps to keep the ending secret. They reportedly shot 3 different endings. In one, Diane leaves and promises to come back in 6 months, which is the version that aired. In another, Sam and Diane get married. A third ending was also filmed, but its content has never been publicly revealed. Very few crew members knew which one would actually be used, and scripts were guarded closely to prevent leaks. The secrecy paid off because the episode drew an estimated 53 million viewers. making it one of the highest-rated sitcom finales of the decade. Even Ted Danson later said he did not know for sure what ending would air until the night of the taping, which only added to the tension on set. Leaving Cheers should have opened the door to a huge film career, but that did not really happen. Her first big starring vehicle after leaving television's top comedy was Hello Again, released by Touchstone Pictures on November 6, 1987. It opened in second place at the box office and made about $5.7 million in its first weekend, which at first suggested some promise. But that promise faded quickly. The film ended up grossing only about $20.4 million worldwide, which was disappointing for a studio comedy built around a star trying to jump from television to movies. Reviews were rough too, with only a small share of critics giving it a positive response. Instead of launching Shelley Long into another level of fame, the film left people wondering whether she had stepped away from Cheers too soon. The same pattern followed with Troop Beverly Hills in 1989. The film had a budget of around $18 million, which was sizable for that kind of comedy, but it opened weekly on March 26, 1989, with about $228 million in its first weekend. By the end of its theatrical run, it had earned only around $8.5 million in the United States and Canada, which meant it made back less than half its budget domestically. At the time, that looked like another clear setback, and some industry watchers were openly confused by her career choices. Instead of leaning into safer romantic comedies or more commercial material, she had taken on something more eccentric and niche. Still, time can change the meaning of a flop. Years later, Troop Beverly Hills found a second life as a cult favorite, especially with Gen X and millennial viewers. And today, it often shows up on lists of beloved guilty pleasure movies. Her personal life also shifted in quieter and sadder ways. Shelley Long had married financial advisor Bruce Tyson in 1981, and the marriage lasted 23 years before ending in divorce in 2004. After that split, later profiles described her going through a period of deep depression and pulling back from public life. She continued receiving residual income from Cheers and Frasier, but she greatly reduced her acting work and stopped chasing the usual Hollywood rhythm. By the middle of the 2000s, she had mostly stepped away from the spotlight, living quietly in California, and rarely appearing at industry events or reunion moments. That retreat became even more noticeable because her actual screen appearances grew so rare. She returned as Diane Chambers in 3 episodes of Frasier between 1993 and 2004, and one of those performances earned her another Emmy nomination as a guest actress. Beyond that, her work in the 2000s was limited. She appeared in a 2008 episode of The Evidence and a 2009 episode of The Closer, both one-off roles. Her most visible later part came on Modern Family, where she played Dee Dee Pritchett in 7 episodes between 2009 and 2013. Even then, she stayed away from the press machine. She did not do the usual major talk show circuit or highly publicized comeback push. That only deepened the image of her as a private and somewhat elusive figure. So when a special Cheers reunion was organized during the 2024 Primetime Emmy Awards, her absence stood out immediately. Other cast members, including Ted Danson, Rhea Perlman, and Kelsey Grammer, were there. Shelley Long had reportedly been invited, and early coverage suggested she was expected to join them. Then, at the last minute, she did not appear, and her name was quietly removed from the credits for the segment. No clear public explanation followed. Because of that, speculation took over. Some people wondered if there was still tension with parts of the cast. Others thought it might have been health-related. Some believed it was simply the same thing that had defined her later life for years, a wish to stay out of the spotlight. Since neither Long nor the Cheers team confirmed the reason, the mystery remained. Then there is Kelsey Grammer, whose life always carried a much darker weight behind the polished wit of Frasier Crane. Long before he became one of the most recognizable men on television, tragedy tore through his family again and again. On July 1, 1975, his 18-year-old sister, Karen Grammer, was kidnapped outside a restaurant in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by Freddie Glenn and 3 accomplices. She was raped and stabbed 42 times. Later accounts said she knocked on a trailer door looking for help and crawled around 400 feet, leaving behind bloody fingerprints and marks from her knees before she died. Kelsey, only 20 at the time, had to identify her body about a week later and then tell their mother what had happened. Decades later, in a 2025 ABC News interview and in his memoir, Karen, A Brother Remembers, he returned to that moment because it never really left him. As if that were not enough, 5 years later, his 2 teenage half-brothers, Stephen and Billy, died in a scuba diving accident off St. Thomas in 1980. On June 1st, Billy failed to surface, and Stephen tried to find him, but died from a fatal embolism during a bad ascent. Billy's body was never recovered. Their mother believed for years that a shark may have taken him. Grammer has said that losing his father, sister, and then 2 brothers in such a short span very nearly destroyed him. That sentence feels heavy, because it was. By the time he was starring on Cheers, those wounds had not disappeared. In 1987, he was arrested for drunk driving in Van Nuys, California. He pleaded no contest and was placed on probation, with conditions that included community service and an alcohol education program. But he did not complete those terms. On February 6, 1990, a second arrest warrant was issued, and he was later sentenced to 30 days in jail, along with 10 days of roadside trash collection. The legal trouble became part of his long and painful struggle with addiction, something he later admitted had damaged both his health and his relationships. Yet out of all of that pain came one of television's most successful second acts. In 1993, the same year Cheers ended, Grammer launched Frasier, the spin-off built around Dr. Frasier Crane. It ran for 11 seasons, from 1993 to 2004, and became one of the most honored sitcoms ever made, winning 37 Primetime Emmy Awards. It also set a remarkable streak by winning Outstanding Comedy Series 5 years in a row, from 1994 to 1998. Grammer himself won multiple acting Emmys for playing Frasier, adding to the recognition he had already received during Cheers. What had started as a supporting character in a bar became the center of an entirely new empire. And Frasier did not stop there. Kelsey Grammer holds the rare distinction of playing the same character across 4 different decades. He first played Frasier on Cheers from 1984 to 1993, then on Frasier from 1993 to 2004, and then again in the revival that premiered in 2023. In the new version, he also serves as an executive producer. That long run has made Frasier Crane one of the most durable characters in television history. Even after all these years, the role still follows him, and in many ways he still follows it. That is part of why talk of a larger Cheers return keeps resurfacing. In 2025, Grammer said that a full Cheers reboot was a real possibility, but only if key cast members such as Ted Danson and Shelley Long came back. He hinted that ideas had been discussed and suggested that bringing Sam Malone and Diane Chambers back into the Frasier world could work, though a lot would have to line up first. Those comments lit up fan speculation again, because once a show like Cheers becomes part of cultural memory, people never really stop imagining one more round at the bar. Woody Harrelson's story moves in a different direction, but it still fits this larger world in a strange way. Even before his fame, his life already carried the kind of wild backstory that sounds almost invented. What is clear from the material here is that by the mid-1980s, he was a young actor from Indiana who had studied at Hanover College on a drama scholarship and had started taking acting seriously through campus productions. Then fate stepped in. In 1985, after actor Nicholas Colasanto died, Cheers needed someone to fill the empty space left by Coach. The creators wanted a new bartender, but not just any bartender. They wanted someone with a simple, friendly, Midwestern quality. Somebody naive, sunny, and a little lost in the big city. Harrelson auditioned for Woody Boyd and gave producers exactly what they were looking for. His sweet, goofy energy worked so well that he was cast right away. That role changed his life. He joined Cheers in his mid-20s, became a national face almost overnight, and soon turned Woody Boyd into one of the show's most lovable characters. In 1989, he won an Emmy for the role, and over the years he earned 5 Emmy nominations for it. But even while Cheers made him famous, Harrelson worried it might trap him. Playing a lovable simpleton for 8 seasons could have locked him into one type forever. He later admitted that he feared Hollywood would only ever see him as Woody Boyd, the nice but clueless bartender with the easy smile and the empty head. So in the early 1990s, he started pushing against that image. He took darker roles and more challenging parts, trying to prove there was more to him than sitcom timing and harmless charm. The gamble paid off in a shocking way with Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers in 1994. In that film, Harrelson played Mickey Knox, a violent serial killer, which was about as far from Woody Boyd as he could get. The change was dramatic and impossible to ignore. Audiences who knew him as the sweet dumb guy from the bar suddenly saw him as dangerous, charismatic, and deeply unsettling. But that role came with its own storm. Rhea Perlman's story began far from Hollywood polish. It started in Brooklyn, and long before she became Carla Tortelli, she was just a young actress trying to find her place in New York. Then, on January 17, 1971, everything changed in a single night. She went to see a one-night performance of a play called The Shrinking Bride in a tiny New York theater with fewer than 200 seats. Danny DeVito was in the cast. There were no stars on stage, no huge crowd, and nothing about the night looked historic from the outside. But for Perlman, it was. She was drawn to him right away, and the connection moved so fast that only 2 weeks later, the two of them were already living together. There was no long courtship and no slow build. One theater date turned almost instantly into sharing a cramped apartment and building a life side by side. That life lasted for decades. They married in 1982, the same year Cheers premiered, which meant that by the time audiences met her as Carla, Perlman and DeVito had already been together for more than 10 years. In a business where relationships often burn out fast, theirs became something much stranger and much more real. It was loud, messy, full of fights, and somehow still lasting. Even when people saw chaos from the outside, there was a kind of strength holding it together. If Perlman gave Cheers its bite, George Wendt gave it one of its warmest and most reliable rhythms. Norm Peterson was not just a character, he became a ritual. His entrance turned into one of television's greatest running gags, and it happened in all 275 episodes of Cheers, from September 30th, 1982 to May 20th, 1993. The pattern never got old. Norm walks in, he says, "Afternoon, everybody." The bar erupts with "Norm." Diane says "Norman," and then comes the one-liner. Week after week, the writers had to top themselves. Even producer Peter Casey admitted the pressure kept rising because the joke had become part of the show's heartbeat. It was so beloved that TV Guide later voted it one of the top sitcom gags ever. The funny part is that even Norm's beer was not quite what viewers imagined. Under the hot studio lights, Wendt usually drank near beer, about 3.2% alcohol. with salt added to keep the foam looking right. He rarely took more than a sip. On screen, though, he made Norm feel effortless. The character became such a part of pop culture that even Vera, Norm's never-seen wife, turned into a running legend without properly appearing. That is how strong the writing was, and that is how perfectly Wendt delivered it. By the time Cheers was at its height, Wendt was a star in his own right. He earned 6 straight Emmy nominations from 1984 to 1989, which showed just how much people loved what he brought to the show. But after Cheers, the road got bumpier. In 1995, CBS gave him The George Wendt Show, where he played radio mechanic George Coleman in a sitcom inspired by car talk. It premiered on March 8th and was gone by April 12th. Only 6 of its 8 episodes aired. After 11 years of success on Cheers, the failure was brutal. It proved what television does so often. A character can be iconic, but that does not guarantee the next show will land. John Ratzenberger's journey on Cheers almost never happened at all, which is what makes it so good. In 1982, during the pilot audition process, he went in to read for Norm Peterson and did not get the part. Producers Charles Brothers and Chris Lloyd turned him down. That should have been the end of it. But as he was leaving the room, he stopped and made one last pitch. He said the bar needed a know-it-all, mailman who spouts useless facts. That little burst of improvisation changed his life. The original pilot did not even have Cliff Clavin in it, but the idea was so strong they hired him on the spot. One quick thought, one smart turn, and suddenly he was no longer the guy who failed the audition. He was the man who created one of the show's most memorable characters. Cliff went on to appear in all 275 episodes of Cheers from 1982 to 1993. Ratzenberger earned 2 Emmy nominations in 1985 and 1986, and by the end of the run, he was making $15,000 per episode. Cliff's strange confidence and ridiculous trivia became his signature. He would say things with such certainty that viewers almost wanted to believe him, even when the facts were absurd. Stories like the Gerber baby becoming a World War II general sounded crazy, yet his delivery sold them. In later years, Cliff showed up again in Wings, Frasier, The Tortellis, and even an animated version on The Simpsons. A failed audition had somehow turned into a career-saving role. Then came a move that surprised a lot of people. By 1993, Cheers was a giant, and Lilith was one of its best-loved characters. Neuwirth had Emmys, visibility, and a place on one of television's most successful shows. Most actors would have stayed right to the end. She did not. She left before the final season began. It was a bold choice, maybe even a risky one, but it fit her. She was more interested in the work she wanted than in staying where the spotlight was brightest. Television fame was huge, but for Neuwirth, the stage still called louder. That decision made even more sense a few years later. In 1996, she took on Velma Kelly in the Broadway revival of Chicago, a role that became one of the defining performances of her career. Night after night at the Schubert Theater, she handled intricate choreography and the hard edge of Kander and Ebb's world with total control. She later described the performance as feeling like microsurgery from 8:1 to 10:20 every night. It was exacting, precise, and full of pressure. She made it look effortless. In 1997, the performance earned her the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical, along with the Drama Desk Award, the Astaire Award, and other major honors. It confirmed what theater people already knew. Neuwirth was not just a TV actor who happened to be good on stage. She was one of Broadway's real heavyweights. Even after Cheers ended, television never really let her go. She kept returning as Lilith on Frasier, appearing across that series from 1993 to 2004. The episodes often centered on Lilith and Frasier trying to co-parent their son, Frederick. And every time she came back, the old spark returned instantly. Her schedule was often arranged so she could shoot in tight blocks and get back to the stage. That balancing act said a lot about how the industry viewed her. She was not trapped in one lane. She could step into a sitcom, steal the episode, and then go right back to Broadway as if she had never left.